Welcome to Cupcakes and Clarity, the podcast for high-achieving women who want success and fulfillment without burning it all down. I'm your host, Lisa Pirinelli, and every Tuesday I'm bringing you honest conversations and practical strategies to help you create more balance, purpose, and joy in your work and your life. Think of this as a heart-to-heart with a trusted friend. Together we'll get real about the challenges you face, and you'll leave every episode feeling clear, confident, and inspired to make your next chapter your best one yet.
Hi, welcome back to Cupcakes and Clarity. I'm your host, Lisa Pirinelli. Today, I want to talk about something that might change the way you look at your goals, your calendar, and some of the decisions you've been making lately. And I promise we're not going to talk about waking up at 5 a.m., creating the perfect morning routine, or even making, a super specific color-coded 5-year plan, because I don't think you need another thing to manage. I think there's a bigger question that can make an even bigger impact. And that's, are you designing your life, or are you building your life around everything that's already happening? Because those sound like they might be the same thing, but they're not. There's a really big difference between living by default and living by design. And then once you see it, you might start noticing it in some surprisingly ordinary places, like lunch. Yes, lunch. Let's just say you have a meeting scheduled over your lunch hour. It's important, your team needs you there, a client is available at that time, and maybe it's the only time everyone could get together. So you skip lunch. No big deal. You eat at your desk later. You've done this before. And honestly, sometimes that's just life. And I'm not suggesting that every time you miss lunch, you need to stop everything and declare in some major dramatic way, I am reclaiming my life. Please don't. Sometimes you need to take the meeting. Sometimes you need to be the team player. Sometimes life requires an accommodation. The interesting part is what happens when the exception becomes the pattern, because eventually lunch becomes the thing that is always movable. Your meeting isn't, your client's schedule isn't, the request isn't, but your lunch, yeah, that's flexible. And after a while, you're not just occasionally giving up your lunch. You've created a pattern where your time is the easiest time to move. And here's the sneaky part. Nobody may have told you to do that. You may have created the expectation yourself simply by doing it often enough. The next time someone needs something at noon, they think, she'll probably be able to make that work. And honestly, they're not necessarily being unreasonable. They're responding to the example you've given them. The exception became the expectation. And that is one of the biggest clues that you might be living by default. So let's think about how this happens in other parts of your life. You stay late one night because something genuinely needs to get done. That's reasonable. And then you do it again. And then Friday afternoon becomes the time you catch up on everything you didn't get to during the week. Then working late isn't really an exception anymore. It's just how the job gets done. Or someone asks, can you just take a quick look at this? Sure. 10 minutes? No big deal. Then there's another quick look and another favor and another thing you can just squeeze in. And pretty soon your day is full of everyone else's little things and you're trying to do your actual work in all the little cracks. Now again, none of those individual decisions were necessarily wrong. And that's what makes this so tricky. Living by default rarely looks like a bad decision. It usually looks like a reasonable decision made repeatedly. And those repeated decisions start creating a life. Here's another way to think about it. Your calendar is basically a blueprint for your life. A blueprint tells you what someone is actually building. It doesn't tell you what they say they want the house to look like. It shows you where the rooms are, what's connected, what's getting in its space, what's being built first. Your calendar does something very similar. You might say, I really want more time with my family. I want more flexibility. I want time to exercise. I want to have space to think. I want to stop feeling like I'm rushing all the time. Those things may be completely true, but look at the blueprint. What actually gets protected? What gets moved? What gets squeezed in? What gets postponed? What gets whatever time is left over? Because your calendar doesn't know what you say matters. It shows what is repeatedly getting your time, attention, and flexibility. And I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. Quite the opposite, because please know, I have been guilty of this myself. This is something I see women do all the time. People in general get this way. It's just about making these little small decisions, and they really impact our lives. I want you to look at this because a blueprint can be changed. You don't have to tear down the entire house, right? In this example, you could move a wall, change a doorway, create a little more space. And sometimes that's what change in your life looks like. It's not about blowing everything up or making some drastic change. Redesigning is just about what isn't working anymore. And there's another reason I think these little decisions matter so much. They're a lot like compound interest. If you put a little money into an account once, you probably don't notice much. But make that deposit consistently over time, and eventually the difference becomes significant. The same thing happens with our choices. If you miss one lunch, that's not a big deal. One late night, probably nothing. One weekend spent catching up, again, probably nothing. One yes when you really wanted to say, I don't have room for that, again, not a big deal the one time. But when those choices keep repeating, they compound. And eventually, you have something bigger, a life that has been built around those choices. But here's the really good news. The same thing that can compound against you can compound in your favor. So, protect your lunch once. You may notice that that felt really good. You protect it again. Now you've created a little evidence that your time can actually be protected. Do it again. Now it's becoming a pattern. Someone asks for that time and you say, I am not available then. And maybe nothing dramatic happens, but you just changed the expectation. You reclaimed a tiny piece of ownership, and that really matters because sometimes we think we need confidence before we can make a change. But confidence often comes after the change. You make a different choice, you see what happens, and now you have evidence that you can make a different choice. That's how confidence starts to grow. And it's not because you suddenly feel fearless. It's because you have proof. And I'm using the example of lunch, but just know like this is because it's something that we all can just imagine at some point, like we skipped lunch or we let somebody schedule in that time because, right, it's a lot of people are free at that time. If like most people are taking a lunch break or kind of that's just like culturally kind of how we do things. So it's easy to squeeze stuff in. So that's why I'm using that choice. But it could be your morning coffee. It could be your morning journal. It could be your face care at night. It's all these things. Whatever it is, it really matters to you. It is important to you and where you're skipping that and making other choices. So living by default versus living by design. This is where I want to introduce an idea that's becoming a really important part of the work I do with women. There are two very different ways we can approach our lives. Again, the first is what I like to call living by default. And it looks something like this. We have goals, achievement, those fit into our life based on the results. You decide what you want to accomplish, you work toward it, and you get really good at making everything else fit around it. And maybe that works for a while until it doesn't. The other way is living by design, and the order is different. It's life, what matters, design, goals, decisions, action. Your life comes first. not because your career doesn't matter, not because goals don't matter, not because you shouldn't be ambitious, but because your goals are supposed to support the life you want, not quietly become the reason you don't have the life you want. And that's a very different starting point. Instead of asking, what do I want to accomplish? What is my goal? And then figuring out how to make everything else fit around it, you start by asking, what do I actually want my life to look like? What matters to me now? What do I want more room for? What do I want less of? What do I want my normal Tuesday to look like? And then you work backward. What needs to change? What goals support that life? What decisions will move me in that direction? And what am I willing to do differently? That's living by design. And here's the part I really want you to remember. Living by design isn't about making the perfect decision. It's about making your decisions on purpose. Very intentional decisions to work towards the life that you want. So every episode, I like to share a cupcake moment, and it's about finding joy or connection or clarity in everyday moments of life. And I didn't come up with the title of Cupcake Tuesday just randomly. It was actually, if you want to know the history of that, you can go back to episode 1, and I explain a little bit more about like how I came up with the name of my podcast and around the whole concept of Cupcake Tuesday. So it's not as big surprise that I named Cupcake Moments after that as well. But it's about finding the joy in, again, clarity or connection in everyday life. And so one of the things I love about the Cupcake Tuesday tradition is that the cupcake isn't really about the cupcake. Okay, it is a little about the cupcake because cupcakes are delicious and they're a fun treat, but it's really about creating a tiny moment in the middle of ordinary life that isn't there because everything else is finished. Nobody says, okay, Lisa, you've completed your emails, you've answered every message, handled every responsibility, and now you've earned one cupcake. You earned one moment of peace, one treat. That's not how it works. Cupcake Tuesday happens because Tuesday happened. And I think there's something important in that. Because if we're not careful, we can start treating our lives like the reward at the end of a very long to-do list. I'll make time for that when things calm down, or I'll take that trip when work isn't so busy. I'll get back to that hobby when the kids don't need me as much. I'll take care of myself when I get through this busy project. I think about what I actually want once everything else is handled. But what if everything else being handled isn't actually the requirement for you to start living your life? What if your life is happening right in the middle of the messy Tuesday? That's the part I love about the cupcake. It's small, it's ordinary, it doesn't require a huge life overhaul. It's just a reminder that your life doesn't have to wait until you've finished taking care of everything else. And I think that's true for much bigger things too. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I can see it. Maybe you're noticing some of those little decisions you've been making. And maybe you've realized that you've gotten really good at making your life work around everything else. But you're not quite sure what needs to change first. That's exactly what I help women figure out. And I have a Freedom Map Clarity session where we spend 90 minutes and we step out of the day-to-day noise and look at what's actually going on. Where are you right now? What matters to you right now? And what's creating the gap between the life you're living and the life you want? What needs your attention first? You don't have to come into the session knowing exactly what you want to do next, and that's kind of the point. You just need to know that the way things are working right now isn't quite working for you anymore. The goal isn't to leave with another giant list of to-do things you should change. It's to leave knowing where you are, what's really going on, and what your next move or move should be. That's what the Freedom Map Clarity session is designed to do. So if you're interested, you can find the information over at lisapirinelli.com. And if you don't need a session right now, that's okay. But I really hope that you can take the idea from this episode and you can start paying attention to those little decisions, because those little decisions tell you a lot. And if you still want help, but you're not sure if you're quite ready for an actual session, then just feel free to reach out to me. You can email me. You can reach out to me on, LinkedIn or Facebook. And maybe we even just start with a 15-minute assessment. I can do those for free. And just let's get you started. So reach out if this is something that is clicking for you. So before we wrap up, I want to give you something you can actually use this week, because I don't want you to finish this episode thinking, well, that was really interesting, and then immediately go back to doing everything exactly the same. So let's make this really simple. I want you to first notice, name, and then nudge. So notice, name, and nudge. First, we're going to do notice, and that's where you ask yourself, where does my time keep disappearing? Where is it I want my time, but it's not happening? So don't overthink it, because again, maybe it's lunch. Maybe you're not able to take lunch. That's disappeared. Or maybe it's your evenings are disappearing. Or maybe it's time between getting home and going to bed. Maybe it's your weekends. Maybe it's time with your kids. Maybe it's exercise or sleep. Or maybe it's simply the time you thought you'd have to yourself that somehow never appears. Just pick one. And then second, you're going to name it. So you're going to ask, what keeps taking that time? Where's it going? Is it meetings, requests from other people, your inbox, errands, unfinished work? Is it your own expectations you're putting on yourself? And there's a massive amount of pressure to always be just holding it together? Are you always waiting until everything else is done before giving yourself any time? Just name what's actually happening. Again, no judgment upon yourself. This is just a time to notice what is actually happening. And then third is to nudge. So ask, what's one small change I can make this week without blowing it all up? I don't have to make drastic changes. And this is where I want you to really start small. I'm talking really small. Maybe it's protecting your lunch 3 days this week. Maybe it's not scheduling over that time. And maybe you eat away from your desk. Maybe you leave work 30 minutes earlier one day. Maybe you stop saying yes immediately and say, let me check and get back to you. I really love that one. Let me check and get back to you. That is such an easy one to start with. If that's not something you're doing already, that's a really, really great one to start with. Maybe you protect one evening. You don't have to redesign your whole life this week. What's one small change I can make this week without just blowing up my whole life or just redesigning everything? And this is where I want you to start really small. I mean, really small. So maybe it's protecting your lunch 3 days this week. Maybe it's not scheduling over that hour. Maybe you eat away from your desk. Maybe you leave work 30 minutes earlier one day. And you stop saying yes immediately and maybe start saying, let me check and get back to you. Maybe you protect one evening. You don't have to redesign your whole life this week. You're looking for one place where you can make a different choice and learn from it and feel it and just see the impacts of it. And here's the part I really want you to remember. Don't judge the change by whether it felt comfortable. Judge it by what you learned, what you experienced. What happened when you protected that time? How did people respond? How did you feel? What did you discover you actually needed? Because that information is useful. You're not trying to prove that you can perfectly redesign your life. You're gathering evidence about what works for you, and that's how a different life starts to become possible. Just remember, you don't have to do a major overhaul. You don't have to burn it all down. And I think this is especially important for women who have built a good life, because sometimes when something doesn't feel right anymore, we assume the answer has to be dramatic, like quit the job or start over, move, change careers, do something completely different. And sometimes a big change really is the right answer, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you don't need to tear everything down. Sometimes you just need to start looking at the decisions that are shaping it. So maybe it is protecting lunch. Maybe it's changing when you schedule meetings. Maybe it's asking for more flexibility. Maybe it's reconsidering a goal that made perfect sense 3 years ago, but doesn't fit your life anymore. And maybe it's finally making room for something you've been saying you want to do for a very long time. That's the beauty of living by design. It's not about creating some perfect life. It's about making sure the life you're building actually belongs to you. Because you can accomplish every goal you set and still end up with a life that doesn't feel like yours. Or you can start in a different place. Start with your life, start with what matters, design around that. Then set goals that support it. Make decisions from there and take action. So life, what matters, design, goals, decisions, action. That's the order of living and designing your life. That's a very different way to build a life. And honestly, I think it's one worth trying. So if this conversation is hitting home, I would love to continue it with you in person. So whether you book a session with me or if you're going to be in the Indianapolis area, I'll be at the Fuel Your Future event hosted by Infosys on September 15th, where I'll be leading Fuel Your Energy using the Freedom Map. It's a workshop designed to help you take this idea off the page and actually start looking at your own life through this lens. So if you're attending, come find me. I'd love to meet you. And if you're listening to this later and thinking, okay, Lisa, I think I might be living by default in a few more areas than I realized. Well, welcome to the club. The good news is you don't have to figure it all out today. You just have to start noticing. Start with one small decision, maybe even lunch, and see how the impacts start to change and build over time. So thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have an incredible day. Thank you again for spending this time with me, and I will see you in the next episode.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Cupcakes and Clarity. If today's conversation inspired you and you'd like even more tips and strategies tailored to your life, go to lisapirinelli.com/resources for more self-guided tools. And if you're ready for personal support to help you navigate what's holding you back, I'd love to meet you. Head over to lisapirinelli.com to schedule your free consultation call. New episodes drop every Tuesday, so be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean so much if you shared it with a friend or leave a quick review. Until next time, here's to creating more clarity, confidence, and joy in your life, one cupcake at a time.